Hello, everyone. Hi, so we're gonna probably shut me up after I talk, just so that we can make sure that you can hear everybody who's on Zoom. But welcome, everyone, to the Grand Army of the Republic room here at the Chicago Cultural Center. My name is Regina Gloria, and I am the Director of Education at Ragdale. I'm here along with Sam Lewis and Avery Grant and Michael Clevenger from the organization, representing Lake Forest and the residency program up there. If you're not familiar with Ragdale, I think most of you here are. Some of you on Zoom may not be, but if you're not familiar with Ragdale, we're a residency program that's been around for almost a little over 45 years up in Lake Forest, and we provide time and space and residencies for up to 200 multidisciplinary artists each year. So that they can produce new exciting work and that we can continue to engage audiences with all sorts of creative work that's produced. And we're very pleased to be here in the city, hosting one of a series of Ragdale and Chicago events, particularly during this weekend, during the AIA conference. And interestingly enough, it all sort of worked out that we can convene some of the architects from our Ragdale Ring program. And if you're not familiar with the Ragdale Ring project, this is the 10th anniversary of this program that's been going on as an international competition, a design-build competition, where we invite teams of designers, architects, pretty much anyone who is interested in thinking about how they might want to create a sort of performance space, a venue out into the landscape. And so this is a project that's built on location, on the grounds at Ragdale, within our 5 acres, with proximity to 50 acres of prairie. And we feed them and house them, and they get to build this really remarkable project, which over the course of the season, we have artists perform on. And so that lasts over a year, and then it gets torn down at the end of the year, and then the cycle repeats the following. So we're excited, I'm excited to be moderating conversation between 2 winning teams, one from 2022 and one from 2014. I selected them to be in this conversation because I think their work resonates pretty well, and we're very closely, not just with the idea of the proximity to the landscape and the prairie, but I think in concepts of this idea of growth. And you'll get a chance to hear about their projects. We'll give each of them about 10 minutes to talk about it, and then we'll ask them a couple of questions, and I hope some of you have questions for them as well. The 2022 Ragdale Ring winning entry is Echo, and it's a proposal by the design team Sick and Field Trip, made up of Ahnaf Chowdhury, Anuradha Desai, Amelia Gan, and Marda Zenawi. And I'm just gonna preface this by saying this was such a fantastic time for this group. I will say personally that they're one of these groups that I felt like I really bonded with, and I think they really benefited from just that communal time together. So I'm not gonna talk about their project, I'm gonna let them talk about it, but it's very exciting to see, and you can see on our display here, remnants of some of the work that they did, including some prototypes of the benches that were incorporated in their project. And speaking with them is Antonio Torres of the Bittertang Farm, and he's representing this group which he co-founded with Michael Lovrich. They produced the project Buru Buru back in 2014, only the second Ragdale Ring project. Recently, he has built 3 inflatable pavilions, a pregnant sugar-oozing piñata, a plush toy collection, a sagging birdcage, a room of wax, an edible environment, and a living amphitheater. So it's going to be an exciting conversation to hear how that correlates with some of the other work that the ECHO team is working on. Torres is a recipient of numerous architectural awards, including the Architectural League Prize and the New Practices Award from AIANY. He was a finalist in the MoMA PS1 Young Architects Competition in 2015 and was awarded the TED Fellowship in 2013. So without further ado, I'd actually like to send it over to you, Antonio, if you wanted to talk first about your project, Buru Buru, and then maybe we'll hand it over to the second field trip team.
Sure. Thank you, Regin. Let me try to share my screen here. And while I do that, thank you so much for accommodating. I was supposed to be there in person and I was really looking forward to it. So I'm glad that we could make it work this way. I am based in Chicago, so that would have been a great opportunity to sort of be part of this event in person. So thank you again for the opportunity. As Regin mentioned, my name is Antonio. I am one of the co-founders of an architecture and design practice named the Bitter Tank Farm, together with my partner in crime, Michael Loveridge, who is based out of the Pacific Northwest. We've been working and developing projects with a deep interest in materiality that tends to develop and growth. And I'll talk a little bit about, and I'll try to unpack this in a few minutes as we also try to kind of hopefully frame a couple of concepts that could be interesting for us to engage as a kind of conversation with SICK and Field Trip. This was a very exciting opportunity for us 8 years ago. We had been developing around that time a series of small scale projects and pavilions, primarily in New York. And so this was an opportunity for us to kind of come back to Chicago. I'm originally from Chicago, and to try to really kind of engage with the prompt that was super exciting to us, that Ragdale and the Ragdale Ring actually represented. There weren't that many competitions back then that allow such a kind of opportunity to really bring a team of people, students, young practitioners together and try to come up with a project. So that was a really fascinating experience for us. We were able to bring students from Mexico, from different parts of the United States where Michael and I had been sort of teaching and had some influence at that time. So it was a really fantastic and a really fascinating opportunity. And just to talk about, maybe just to say that we dub ourselves a farm, and the reason for us calling ourselves a farm and kind of staying away at the beginning from this idea of, or diving right into an architectural practice, an atelier, an office, a corporation, a group, a collective, like all these things that, we often kind of think about as we try to figure out what we are as a group of young designers who are trying to make something happen. We wanted to actually kind of take an opportunity to figure out what other relationships we can actually engage architecture with that not necessarily always surrounded or were embodied by a kind of human relationship. So we started to think really a lot about plants and animals, and that is sort of like what started to construct this idea and this narrative that we ran with in terms of like why we would be interested in creating architecture that is cyclical, that changes, that grows, that allows for an immediate environment to kind of take a much more charged sort of affect into the projects and the types of experiences that we wanted to create for people. So what you're looking at here on the screen is Buru Buru. We proposed essentially a project where we try to meld architecture and landscape together, and we propose a kind of mound that rose from the lawn in the back of the Ragdale home. And for us, this was an opportunity to really try to figure out what ways we can engage the concept of an amphitheater or stage in such a way that it started to become much more embedded into the landscape. It was something that we wanted to really figure out how to manipulate that ground so that it started to produce a much more kind of sculptural approach to how we began to think about the project. So this is a plan view of the final design, in which you can see here in the initial perspective, it was really about kind of lifting and pulling this organic mound that would start to create an interior space where we can imagine a stage and a kind of envelope that would start to create this idea of being under a lifted organic envelope. And so as we kind of developed the project, and as we also really tried and worked with ways to bring unexpected materials or materiality that often is perhaps not so tied to architectural systems, or the way that we were thinking about hay, for example, as a material that can be packaged and that can be controlled in a very kind of specific way. We rely on this erosion control system of wattles, as they're called, as a kind of unit that would start to give us a very flexible and a very malleable element that we started to kind of work with and understand as a kind of building block for kind of shaping the form that we wanted to give this project. And so these are just a few images of the study models, and just to give you a sense of how maybe our process is in the way in which we deal with these kind of complex moments in form and geometries, but also at the same time, it's really about trying to figure out and really develop the projects as we are constantly interrogating the kind of physical nature and the complexities of how to bring something like this into reality. So again, just to give you a sense of the work that was done in the development of the project, and then really just kind of sourcing the elements and the material, and just to put emphasis in this presentation on the actual hay wattle. I also wanted to share a video here of the kind of things that we get into when we build these projects. We are a design build firm in the sense that all of these projects that we've done so far, Michael and I, with a team with a team, essentially takes on the responsibility to put these projects together. So these are just kind of playful moments in which we often always encounter our builds turning into performances. Like, how do you rig something so that, you know, these kind of forms start to get animated, and they started to become a very fun sort of things to put on as we got higher and higher. And essentially, because of the complexity of building on a pyramid or in a slanted geometry, there's only so many things you can do with a ladder, right? So just to give you again a sense of how the project developed, and you know the kind of extent to which we had to rely on all of these systems coming together to really make the scale and the intention and all of the intricacies of the project kind of happen, where we really started to kind of understand all of these interior spaces as moments where people can actually start to maybe inhabit and kind of understand performance in a different way, and the way in which a stage or an interior space could be experienced. So here's a night view where we kind of implemented a few lighting tricks that we had learned along the way, but also just to again, continue to kind of explore the specific atmospheres and the qualities that we can start to get from these very organic, natural elements that form the project. Some views of some of the events. If you've been to Ragdale, and if you're part of this community, I mean, I think it's a fascinating and great sort of time to visit these events over the summer. And then, once the project was done, the performances were happening, everyone was happy, the project started to kind of take up a life of their own. And that's where we try to take the projects and we encourage the projects to do that, to allow for the natural environment to sort of take over. And in this case, we, within weeks and within the kind of heat and the moisture of July and August, we began to really record these moments where the ground was really kind of creeping up the sides of the mound in a very interesting way. There was obviously vegetation that we instigated, that we were anticipating, but there was also moments like mushrooms on the exterior, mushrooms on the interior that started to emerge. And all of this also us wanting to really encourage a process of growth, us wanting to encourage a kind of intentionality of decay, and us in the end dubbing this a giant rotting amphitheater, in the sense that it was meant to kind of serve its purpose. It was meant to kind of be up through the early fall, and then eventually return to a compost. And what we had proposed was to then use a lot of the organic material and use it throughout the prairies. And it was something that was kind of worked out in that way, in terms of what do you do with these types of ephemeral projects once they kind of serve their purpose. And so just to kind of move into a more recent project, one that we built last year here in Chicago for the Architecture Biennial, that was directed by a UIC professor, David Brown, and the Available City, in that this was a permanent installation. We were lucky, and in a way, we were given a permaculture park to design a pavilion, a kind of permanent installation, in which we really try to, again, approach the elements with a kind of intentionality of developing complexity and spatial organizations, but through a natural material selection. So in this case, you're kind of seeing the early ideas and the renderings about kind of how to create this room. We wanted to actually have a pavilion that felt more enclosed, that felt more that felt more like a room. And so this is what you'll see in these images. At the moment, these are meant to be these substrates. So what is going to happen is that these are going to evolve. These are raw pieces of wood that have been chainsaw carved, and they'll start to open up, and they'll start to begin to also a process of decay and softening that will hopefully start to also bring a bunch of different living matter that will start to be promoted out of this. And I'll talk a little bit about what these are. You can see here just the way in which a chainsaw carver that we worked with kind of produced these pieces and got the shape and the kind of texture, and then we would take them and finalize them and treated them and did the kind of things that we needed to do to anticipate these pieces evolving and sort of growing over the next 5 to 10 years. So we also worked with a willow artist who produced these large-scale woven forms out of willow sticks. And these are now kind of a substrate for live willow cuttings that had just been planted a couple weeks ago that will start to take on the form on itself. And so over the years, it'll kind of start to represent and grow on these substrates. So here you see the kind of images of the final room. It's called the living room. And so there's this kind of work that I wanted to also share with you and to sort of also kind of have this as a way of maybe setting up the conversation for our discussion today. So I hand it over to the winning team for this year. Thank you.
So, hi everyone, and thank you for coming to listen to our panel discussion. Our project is called ECHO, and as many of you know, it really took a village for this project to happen. So before we began, we just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who made this possible and give a shout out to all our friends who came and our friends at Ragdale, Lake Forest, Open Lands, Rosborough Partners, and several other experts without whom this project would not have taken shape. So thank you. This project is really a collaboration between SICK and Fieldtrip. SICK's practice chooses to take projects as they come and respond to them using language and structures that are innate to their briefs. And this has really allowed them to have a user-guided approach, which is research-based and have research-based projects in scale, construction, drawing practice, material processes, and inhabitation. Fieldtrip is a practice interested in exploring interdisciplinary research, using practices of ethnographic methodologies to create platforms for communities to represent them and to explore a community's changing identity through built form. So a lot of people ask us, how did you guys come together? And this is really how we came together, through a WhatsApp message Amelia sent. And you can see we had 2 weeks left here and probably completed the proposal in the last 3 days, but here we are. The way we responded to the brief was to the theme of roots, which was the theme of the year. And we looked at the original Ragdale Ring, which was designed by Howard Shaw, which was above all a proposition of nature. And Shaw's ring itself was an echo of the outdoor theater at the Villa Ginanneschi-Gori in Italy. So we were formally very inspired by the circle and wanted to propose exploring the layering of these echoes within echoes and their underlying sensibilities. So our proposal, at the heart of the proposal is this round stage, and it spanned 45 feet across with enough space for seating 150 people around the perimeter. And alternatively, the stage was designed so that it can also be used as seating with the performance that can occur in the lawn in front of it. And surrounding the stage is this deconstructed ellipse of reed walls, and that invites slippage of people through and around the side. So the modification of our ring from the original echo was through this reverberation created out of the circle, which provided us with the cues where we could have the grass walls, where we should carve out the planters. We also tilted the axis so that it aligns with the beautiful sunset that overlooks the prairie.
So the material strategy really derives from the temporary nature of the Ragdale Ring. So everything we chose is biodegradable or grows. A lot of the majority of the material in our project are plants. We have hundreds of square feet of planter zones, but also the stage itself is made of biodegradable material. For example, the mulch that we used as the top finish layer, and as well as the retaining wall, which is made of compressed earth blocks, which is actually comprised of the same soil you would find on site. And these blocks were kind of the irregular pieces that weren't going to be used for the construction of homes and stuff. So we used them and can embrace that irregularity. And then on top of that, we kind of finished this with this metallic gold paint to at least create some kind of stark contrast with the natural material. So, and in the next slide, you'll see kind of the section that we originally planned, and the stage is filled up with sand, and then the layer of mulch on top. And then the following slide, you'll see that the unrolled kind of elevation of this retaining wall. There are a lot of elements that are not seen on site, the kind of structural like properties of this wall. There's rebar to kind of hold the structural integrity of the wall, but also burlap, which is a natural material using that. You can see in the plan, it's tying the retaining wall into the sand, holding that kind of curved shape. This side plan kind of shows the overall planter zones as well as the circular stage. And then scattered throughout the site are these benches. They're designed by Omar and Indras. I think Omar's on the call here today. But the materiality of them is OSB sheets painted gold, again, to create that stark contrast with the natural material, but also to create some connection with the mulch that's present on the site. The benches themselves are a play on a traditional rocking chair, kind of an inverse of it, allows it to pivot on the top. And that motion, we really wanted to kind of mimic the movement of grass in the wind. Here's some more photos of the benches.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. My connection is a little unstable, so just let me know if you guys can't hear me anymore. As it regards the plants, as was previously mentioned, it was definitely one of our primary design elements that we pulled from Shaw's ring, which was itself the echo of kind of teatro verzura, which is a certain style of outdoor amphitheater, which is itself the echo of a meadow. So that's something that we were really pulling heavily from. As you can see, there is definitely an understanding of it as an architectural material. So we're looking at it, if we can go to the next slide, not only in terms of its properties as a massing, but also for its kind of more ephemeral qualities. So we were looking at it for its translucency, for its motion, in particular with the type of plants that we were using for what we're calling our wall section. These are all perennials, all natives, actually all sourced very nearby. And these are kind of the heavy hitters, actually, if you know, of prairie grasses. So we have Indian grass, switchgrass, and then two types of big blue stem. This was in deference to the presence of a prairie very close to the Ragdale Foundation, a really rare pristine prairie. And so we wanted to, first of all, be very conscious of any plant material that we brought onto the site and its potential for invasion or destabilizing of the prairie's ecology. And then secondly, really take it as a place for inspiration. Obviously, these also have really beautiful qualities in terms of color and height. In the next slide, we're also looking at confetti. So our planting operates, I guess, in two sorts of line weights. We have our heavy planting, which is our wall, which is defined by its height, its materiality, but then also the way that we dug the trenches. The confetti, by contrast, was planted kind of plug by plug. And these are all seasonal grasses, seasonal blooms. They perform in different ways in terms of their ability to either attract or deter pollinators and pests. We were aiming to have a kind of bloom schedule. So you'll see that we have some late spring ephemerals, some summer ephemerals, but also some summer to fall bloomers. And this we really saw as an opportunity to expand the life cycle of of the ring, but also kind of provide a consistent interest to non-human inhabitants of this ring. And the way that we were curating that, if you'll see in the next slide, is sort of pulling them together, packaging in such ways that they play against each other to sort of gently guide animals that we were comfortable having near human inhabitants towards the ring, and then animals that we would rather avoid the ring, such as deer, against the kind of main grain of the ring. Additionally, you'll see on this plan that that level of interest in the materiality also exists in the rooms, which have a
I think it might be your internet, Marda.
Did I?
We can hear you. It's
okay.
Just very slow-mo, but it's fine.
Oh, okay, sorry. Then I guess I'll just close out by saying that the primary thing we were using the grasses for is almost kind of as a wallpaper. So the inside of the rooms are all lined with dancing wind blue stem, which has a really vivid red color. But any walls sort of facing the actual stage are all black, and this is done. They're Black Hawk blue stem, and this is done to kind of highlight the performers. The kind of massing or the thickness of these walls is then either the Cloud9 cisgrass, which has a kind of green-silver characteristic, or the Indian grass, which has a gold-green characteristic.
Here we have the time lapse of entire construction. Though a lot of it is not captured, like weekly pre-planning call with Regents and with the other collaborators like Rosborough Partner, Jazz, Open Land for consultation on the landscaping and also with planting. And here you can see the trench was dug out. And then we have 72 tons of sand actually that came in. We had to put plywood all over in order to protect the grass. And then top with layer of mulch. And then we want to pan through the next slides of construction photos. Here we have some burlap holding the sand to the retaining wall, and then we have steel rods, reclaimed steel rods that we found on Ragdale's property, actually. On the left and the right, there you could see the foundations of what we're calling rooms coming together, which are the grass bits being dug out. And then in the center, the stage is at a stage of receiving sand. Here we are laying earth bricks with the mortar mix with just 10% cement, and the rest of it was all soil. And the bricks, as Ahnaf mentioned earlier, it was just compressed earth. Close up. So as we really watch the site progress, this is our first attempt or some working in progress towards documenting the plant growth and the site through a play of fidelity and low res, high res. As we move on and we receive more media and images and videos, then this composite model that we're trying to build, parts of it will become HD depending on where it's kind of captured the most. So really this is the first preview at our attempts on documenting the site. And here from all the photogrammetry and reconstruction that we have done, these are just tiles as part of the process of collecting these or constructing the model. And here we'd like to end with a small snippet of the view that we also departed with when we had left Ragdale, with lots of hope waiting for it to grow. Cool, that's all we have from second field trip. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Regin, you're on mute.
Yeah. Can you hear me on Zoom now?
Yep, we hear you.
Thanks. Thank you both teams for sharing your an in-depth look into the creative process of both of your projects. I was just thinking, I realized that both of your projects, and I didn't do this deliberately, but both of your projects were set in almost the exact same location in the back of the Ragdale house. And it might have something to do with that kind of proximity to the prairie and that view, that sort of the natural framing that Howard Van Doren Shaw envisioned when he was planting the house in the position that it is and overlooking that prairie. So I was just curious to realize that it probably made sense that both of the teams, with the 10 years apart, were thinking about that relationship to nature. But the question I wanted to pose both of your teams, and this is just to lend some context to the audience, we were having this conversation about what we wanted to actually talk about in this panel discussion. We talked a lot about this idea of growth, and an idea came up, I think Antonio, you had brought up, about this sort of criteria that the architectural experts sort of kept bringing about this precision, this quote-unquote precision that's required in the architecture field. And interestingly enough, when you're dealing with things in the wild, things in nature, and both of these projects are perfect, examples of sort of the antithesis of that precision. Is this sort of relying on this idea of growth to sort of dictate or maybe negate what precision is. Can both teams address your ideas on that and how you approach that within your project?
All right. I think it's of course something that I think is at least for us is being a fundamental question for sure. I mean, we've kind of written a little bit about it. We've kind of think about it, and it's this idea of rules and precision that in architecture, as we know, the ones that we're in it and we're practicing and we're trying to build our own projects and all of the things that come with developing an architectural project. I mean, it's just like the practice field, just full of rules. And and a demand for precision that, at least from our point of view, we don't intend to create any more rules for ourselves, nor try to, kind of also deal with precision in a way where we're trying to control every single thing. I think for us, it's been very helpful to also conceptualize a framework that we like to think through as we develop projects, and that is this idea of an ecosystem. We've been doing it for a few years, 2008, 2009. And for us, it's been worked great because within the kind of framework of an ecosystem, all of the parts are interlinked. And so it's about how one can start to deal with multiple layers, multiple systems that can start to be linked up and then some have some level of precision. We go there. Some might be allowed to just have a spur to develop, to sort of thrive in a different way. And so I think that, that has given us ways to find solutions within an open built project. But at the same time, it requires also a level of, I wouldn't say control, but definitely a level of experience and expertise in the way in which you start to then deal with things that want to just take off and have a life of their own, right? So I think that there's a kind of balance. I'm not sure that I'm giving you an answer here. I think it's just, my intention is to kind of pose an answer here to the question, but just more of like how we approach this idea of rules and precisions from a conceptual point of view, in the sense that it's much more interesting for us to think about it as a framework through ecosystems and the way that multiple things are being brought together. And then it's about the kind of whole that starts to be, you can start to get interesting details and a level of refinement and heighten the kind of qualities that you're really kind of going for, without getting too fixated on the, is that a very straight edge or not?
I think when we often talk about precision, right, is that then kind of synonymous with control? And I think the part that you mentioned about ecosystem that resonated with me or us the most, perhaps, is kind of like at least for our team, we keep talking about it as like ecological curation. Right. And then my question is then, this precision or this control, is it then looked at a different scale? So rather than looking at obsessing with straight lines and like as we did in architecture school, then now are we just doing that on a bigger level? And perhaps we don't see that as precision. Like we're designing the system more so than the parts itself. And maybe it's just we can't have precision because it's a scale that we're not used to, right? Like it's Mother Nature. But just talking about our process, the way we arrange the plants as pest deterrents and pollinators, attractors, and then also the color that we're hoping it would bloom into, that ambition versus what we're actually going to get in July or August. Yeah, we have no clue what might come out of it. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if there's a...
No, I like that. Both of you talked about obviously the sort of this idea of relying, or maybe not wanting to deal with the word control or the idea of control, and sort of the way most society deals with it and thinks about it. And when we think about growth, it's an interesting idea when the materials you selected, both the wattles in the case of Buru and all the different plants, of course, in the Echo project, it's all about evolution, or these things that consistently evolve. And I'm curious to know from both of you what that relationship is between growth and or how you define growth when something is consistently growing or dying. And it's like, we had that conversation as well, I recall.
I think even when we were looking at the plants like quite seriously as a material, there's a thing, I think it's actually like military terminology, but I come by it through the show Boondocks. It goes, there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And that's really what it was like looking into this. None of us began our training understanding plants or even valuing plants as a kind of true material. But that thing of precision, when you look up, what is the height of Indian grass? It's like a 2.5 foot difference in range. So maybe it'll be 4 feet, maybe it'll be 6 feet, maybe one day you'll be lucky and it's a sunny spot, it's 8 feet. And there were so many more variables than we could at any point account for. There was also a lot of questions about, if that's the case, then do we budget for our worst case scenario, or do we budget for everything goes really well and the sun is out and everything grows as it should grow? When confronted with those kinds of issues, the one thing that we consistently defaulted to, which made a lot of our decisions much easier, was what was better for the ground. So we had the option to look at some plants that are much more sure bet that will definitely reach the heights that we were hoping to reach, and the kind of the density that we were hoping to reach, as definitely as plants can be. And in those scenarios, it was a kind of, we took on the risk of the unknown.
Yeah.
Because whatever the situation may have been, then at least we knew we kind of started it on the right foot. And after that, there's not much we can do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well. I mean, I think that we're talking maybe here is about designing for these kinds of, it's a design process or in the design process where, at least for us, we have to maybe design the projects to be a little bit glimpy and, not fully formed, so that when you get to the site, that is where you're gonna, prop it up. It might need a crutch here. You might need to prop it up over here. And then it really just kind of starts to become a way of kind of adjusting and really kind of working through all of these things. Like, are things growing? Did you get there and you found that the soil that you were going to need for that very specific sort of process is no longer there? Or it's not necessarily saying that you kind of just have to go with it. It's just mainly saying that there's a level of design that needs to be sort of there, and then there's a way in which you can start to dress things up and to prop things up and to really kind of allow for the essence of the intention and the project to remain, even though certain things had to be adjusted, right? The nature of architecture in general. So, I mean, I also really liked something that you said, Marda, when you were presenting the project, which is to think about planting, or the kind of planting list, as a line weight. I mean, I think that's really is a very architectural way of thinking, which is we do these drawings, we do architectural drawings with a level legibility that comes through the way that we use thicker, different kind of line types. So to be able to then sort of translate or transform lines into a material, and to give it to assign it a material like plants, and the way that these plants can actually produce that that depth, that kind of layering. I think it's really a great way of thinking about architecture.
That's great. Thanks, you guys. So I actually want to make sure that the audience has a chance to ask some questions. So before you do that, I do have one other thing to sort of segue into that. So think about what you might want to ask the architects and the designers here. But we didn't really talk much about the actual relationship to the performers, which this is actually what the project is about. At least the call is to produce something that other artists, namely dancers, musicians, composers, other types of performative works could be interacting with. So can either of your teams talk a little bit about, based on all of the things that we've just talked about, growth and then the sort of the constant evolving venue, how that relates to what that initial intention was for that relationship to the performer?
I mean, I think one thing that we had in mind was just like the flexibility of the space. And over time, obviously it changes, but our project's quite subtle in the way it integrates into the landscape. When you're in one other side of closer to the house, you're actually probably close to the level of the highest point of the stage. It's quite subtle in how it integrates in, and the whole idea, the original proposal was that the stage could be actually the kind of grassed area, and the seating would be on the stage itself, and then the grass walls would allow for the slippage. And I think we had specific views where we would allow for certain framed views, and the growth over time would curate views and allow for spontaneous events. And I think that's something that right now the grass has yet to grow to the height the optimal height, and that's going to happen later in the summer. And so as that happens, the rooms can first function as spaces where people can walk in, and performers can use as spaces where the plants are only waist level, and it caters to a specific use. And then later in the summer it becomes a fully enclosed room. And so I think initially I think it was just the usability of space, allowing for several different kind of performances to take place. But now reflecting on it, it's definitely like I said, the rooms change function over time for sure, as the project grows.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say briefly that I think for us it was something that we were maybe thinking about how the project, once it would actually create this kind of volume or this mountain was kind of lifted off the ground, that it would start to take on some qualities of cavernous or being more of grotto-like, and then that you would find yourself potentially as a performer, you can find yourself wanting to kind of explore the depth of the space, the kind of nook and crevices of this space that you were all of a sudden, kind of performing in. Of course, I think there was a lot of that. I think, Dredgen, if I remember correctly, there was a theater company that came through. I mean, and they just really climbed it. They did what they had to do. So they found the back door, all of these things that you really kind of hope that someone is going to explore. And I think that is also something that it's really great when we're kind of designing these spaces. I see it in your project as well, the kind of rooms and the intimacy of going into these spaces that are a little bit more secluded, or give you time to reflect, or use them in multiple ways. And I think it's often for us for Bittertang is always about how do we attempt to provide people with an opportunity to be sort of surprised by architecture, that you might not felt like you could do certain things, or be sort of confronted with the situation where now you're doing something extraordinary that you probably didn't think you could have. And I think that there were some moments, especially if I remember correctly, with that theater company coming through, where we were just very happy that in that one instance, there was that level of interaction with the project. I think the bugs loved it too.
Yeah, that's really great. And I'm so glad both of you, both of the teams talked about that sort of element of surprise. You know, I think that as a residency program, that is what it's all about, you know, coming to this place together in communal situation with other people and not really knowing what's going to come, but definitely appreciating and making something happen.
Thank you, Virgin.